Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show, where you'll find health and fitness inspiration, motivation, and information shared in 15-minute episodes. Tune in while getting a move on to make leading and enjoying the benefits of a healthy lifestyle almost too easy. It's the Fit 15. And now your host, Catherine Basu.
Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show. I'm your host, Catherine Basu, and I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, who I might actually be reintroducing you to because she has been on the show before. My guest today is Dr. Nicole Avena. She was on for episode 40, and we talked about what to eat when you're pregnant during that episode. And today we're going to talk about what to feed your baby and toddler. So heads up to those of you who are curious about these topics or are looking for gifts for Mother's Day. What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler is Dr. Nicole Avena's new book, and it will be coming out next week, but you can already pre-order the book today. So if you're looking to get that book in your mailbox, ready to go, check out the show notes and you can find a link to that. And then her book, What to Eat When You're Pregnant, is an amazing book that's been out for a few years now. Before it came out, I really struggled to give my clients who were pregnant a good idea of what to actually eat. There's a lot of information out there about what you can't eat and what you shouldn't do, but that's been my go-to book. Anytime I have a client who is pregnant, I give them that as a gift. So highly recommend that book. I'm so excited to get What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler when it comes out, and hope you check out one or both books depending on your personal needs or a friend or family member's needs when you listen to this episode. All right, so my guest, as I said, is Dr. Nicole Avena. She is a research psychologist and neuroscientist who is an expert in the fields of nutrition, diet, and addiction. She received a PhD in psychology and neuroscience from Princeton University in 2006, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at Rockefeller University. Dr. Avena presently is an assistant professor of neuroscience at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York and a visiting professor of health psychology at Princeton University. She has published over 90 scholarly journal articles on topics related to diet, nutrition, and overeating. Her research achievements have been honored by awards from groups including the New York Academy of Sciences, the American Psychological Association, and the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Dr. Avena's book, What to Eat When You're Pregnant, provides a comprehensive guide for women on what nutrients are key during pregnancy and what foods you can eat to obtain them to ensure healthy weight gain for you and healthy development for your baby. Dr. Avena's other book, Why Diets Fail, reviews the research on food addiction and provides a way in which people can remove added sugars and carbohydrates from their diet. Her newest book, that we'll be talking about today, What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler, helps parents navigate the feeding of their baby and has lots of science-based tips to get your child to eat healthy food from the beginning. Dr. Avena regularly makes public speaking appearances to discuss her research and discoveries throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia. She is regularly asked to speak to special interest groups, industry groups, and schools. She's appeared on several television news programs as well as daytime TV shows, including The Doctors and The Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Avena's work has also been featured in many popular print forums, including Shape, Women's Health, New York Times, Bloomberg, Business Week, and Men's Health. She lives in New Jersey and is a mom to 2 girls, wife, and native of New Jersey. She has a blog on Psychology Today, and you can also follow her on Twitter or Facebook. So I hope by reading her bio there, you guys are as impressed and excited to listen to our conversation today. So without further ado, Dr. Nicole Avena, I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
So first question I have for you is, how can you get a new baby off on the right start to eating healthy foods?
Yeah, so I think this is a question that so many new parents have, because especially, when you first decide that it's time for a baby to start eating solid foods, when they've hit that 6-month point and you're ready to start sort of diving into this whole new world of feeding them, you really want to start off with, healthy, nutritious foods. And there's a lot of schools of thought about what are the best ways to go. Some people, suggest maybe start with things like grains. So start with like rice and oatmeal and the kind of more blander things, and then move on to fruits, and then try fruits for a little bit, and then maybe try vegetables. And to be honest, the research suggests that there's really no sort of prescription in terms of what food you have to start off with. What we actually do know now is that you really don't even need to start off with things like rice or oatmeal. If you want to jump right into starting off with vegetables, that can really be a good thing to do for a couple of reasons. One, there's this sort of idea that if you start off with rice or oatmeal, that it's more filling, right? And so I think people think of those types of foods as more satiating and sort of more substantive. And, it's this idea that maybe if I start off feeding the baby those things, that'll help them sleep. Because, those of us that have had little ones know that they go through these periods where they're these little angels and they're sleeping through the night suddenly, and it's just this blissful time. And then all of a sudden, around, maybe 4 or 5 months of age, they start to wake up in the middle of the night. And, it just becomes this whole like disruption of, oh my goodness, why are they waking up? And many parents believe it's because the baby's suddenly hungry, and maybe that, breast milk or formula isn't enough to sustain them. And so there's this idea like, oh, maybe I should start feeding grains. But that's actually not the case. Usually the reason why babies wake up in the middle of the night isn't about hunger. It's more about the fact that their sleep waves are changing. And so as they get a little bit older, they start to develop more periods where they have this sort of light sleep, if you will, where they're more easily aroused. They're not in a deep sleep all the time. They have more adult-like sleep patterns where they kind of rotate between light sleep and deep sleep. And so feeding babies grains to try to put them to bed or to get them to, sleep more throughout the night isn't going to work. If anything, if you start feeding them grains and it's a little too early, like before 6 months, and their tummies aren't ready for it, it could lead to problems with, constipation and just sort of all these gastrointestinal issues that you probably don't want to introduce into your life at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that, again, it's up to the parents and what they think is best, but a good thing to do is to really just start off with vegetables. Starting off with vegetables is important because vegetables are so nutritious and they have lots of different things, vitamins and things that are so important for baby to get.
If you are walking with us and only have 15 minutes, that is your halfway point reminder. You want to turn around now. All right, back to Dr. Avena.
And secondly, the vitamins that we see in vegetables are things that, are going to be beneficial to the baby down the road. And so it's a good idea to get them used to the taste of vegetables and used to eating those types of things from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Part of the issue when you start off feeding baby kind of like a mixture of like, oh, let's try apples today. Oh, let's try peas tomorrow. Well, of course, the apples taste a heck of a lot better than the peas. So it might be hard to get the baby to then say, oh, yeah, I really like the taste of peas if they, know that there's something out there that tastes a heck of a lot better than peas.
Right.
So I advocate that people try to really start off with vegetables mostly in the beginning, and then you can slowly introduce the fruits later on because you want baby to develop a preference for the taste of those vegetables, which are, delicious and healthy for them, but compared to the sweet fruit purees, they're, going to not taste as great.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And any tips for preparation, for vegetables or certain vegetables that might be easier for them to be excited about?
Yeah, I mean, it's really up to you in terms of, I always think it's best to kind of feed the baby what you like, because if you're excited about eating it, and, maybe you have older kids in the house or other people that are, going to eat it too, then that's all the more reason to, have baby feel included with the whole family in terms of the meal. And so, I think that it really, kind of gives this whole sense of like, you're not creating a special thing for the baby. Yeah, obviously you're going to puree it to the consistency that they can handle, whereas like, if everyone else could eat, just, steamed vegetables or vegetables, whatever way you decide to prepare them. But it does kind of give this whole sense of family. And I think that is important to instill from a young age, even in the little ones, because, it kind of sends the message from the beginning that, we eat as a family, we eat, the same thing. because if you flash forward to 2 years from now, you're going to find that you might be a short order cook if, your child starts to think that, they can pick and choose what kinds of foods they want. And, it's really in the best interest of, mom and dad, if everybody's kind of eating the same thing for whatever meal you're preparing. But I think the big thing is to really just, focus on being persistent. One of the things that people tend to do, which isn't such a good thing, is they switch to a new food too early.
Okay.
And so, typically, if you talk to a pediatrician, they'll often suggest, try a new food for maybe 3 days and then, try something new and try something new. And the 3-day window might be okay for making sure that baby doesn't have a reaction or, baby doesn't have an allergy to it. But 3 days is not long enough, according to the science, to actually instill a preference or a liking. There's actually been research studies that have been done in babies looking at this, and it's been determined that you need to give a baby 8 days of exposure to the same food before they start to show a liking for it or an actual preference for it. So 8 days might seem like, a million years to you if you're, excited about feeding your baby. But if you think about it, it's important because you do want baby to like the taste of vegetables and to kind of develop a preference for them to some extent, because once they get older and it's going to go quickly, you're going to have less control over what they're going to keep in their mouth, over what they're going to try. And so if from a very young age, you can really push the vegetables on them, it's going to be easier. Kids are going to take to the fruits no matter what, because fruits are sweet and we just naturally like the taste of sweet. And so that's not going to be something hard to do. But lots of vegetables, like cruciferous vegetables, tend to be, somewhat sour or, have a little bit of a bitterness to them that, as adults, we kind of get over because we know that they're nutritious and they're healthy for us. But, babies don't have that cognitive ability yet. And also, babies perceive tastes very differently than adults do. So they taste things to be much more bitter than we taste them to be. So when they make that sort of face about a particular taste that you put in their mouth, don't necessarily, take that to mean that they hate it. It's more of just, I don't know about this. This is a new thing. Obviously, if, the baby's crying or, very upset, you want to stop. But if they're just kind of making a weird face, that doesn't necessarily mean that they hate it. It might just mean that, this is a strange taste. I have to decide, if I'm going to continue to like this.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess a question for you then along those lines, if you're trying, so you kind of keep trying if they're making the face, and then when would you maybe stop and try something different? I mean, I guess if, like you said, they're crying, but then, for the next day, start with it again,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if, obviously if a baby's crying or refusing, you never want to force them to eat anything.
Sure.
And that's the sign that, you need to stop and try something else, or maybe take a break from eating altogether. Because, that's the another thing. We tend to sort of have this idea that when you first start feeding a baby that, they're little adults, right? That, they need 3 square meals a day and maybe a couple of snacks.
Right.
But that's actually not the case at all, especially for babies that are under the age of 1. All the nutrition that they're getting should be coming from either breast milk or formula. And so food being introduced at that point, at the 6-month point, it's really for fun. And it's really for basically just teaching babies to like food and how to eat. They're not going to be dependent on it in terms of the nutrition. They're getting what they need from breast milk and formula, as long as, you're keeping up with feeding them the amounts that are recommended by the pediatrician. And so that being said, it's really, the type of thing where if the baby's not into it, then take a break. They don't need to eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Sure.
And, maybe baby's not in the mood to eat, or maybe baby doesn't feel like eating right now. And so there's really no regimen that needs to be put into place when you first start feeding the baby. It's really more about, getting the baby to find it fun, getting the baby to be happy, and just getting them to be willing to try new things. But definitely do be persistent. If a baby balks at something and doesn't like it, and you kind of get the vibe that they're not having it today, try it again tomorrow. Try it again later on in the day, because again, it might not necessarily be about the particular food that you're feeding them. It might be more about they have a wet diaper, they're gassy, they're just not in the mood,
Sure.
whatever it could be. There's millions of reasons why babies act the way they act.
Yep, and they can't really tell us why, right? So
Right. Yeah. You really have to be a detective because they just cry and, we don't know why. We have to figure out what it could be. So don't always blame the food. It could be lots of reasons. And, especially if it's, a healthy vegetable, it's something that's worth trying a few more times. And at some point, maybe, you decide, okay, well, maybe this is a food they don't really like. I'm going to switch to something else and then change it up a little bit.
Awesome. So we talked about, you said that we should try vegetables before fruits because they're sweeter and kids will automatically like that. What can we do to limit sweets in general?
Yeah, so I think that this is an issue that comes up a lot because, babies are born with this preference for sweet, right? They're born biologically driven to want to eat sweet foods. It's this sort of drive that we have as humans to perceive things that taste sweet as being safe. And so if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, when we were hunters and gatherers and you would find berries in the woods, the sweet ones were safe to eat. The sour ones were the ones that were going to kill you because they might be poisonous. And so we have this sort of innate drive to think that things that are sweet are good for us. And that is true to some extent. Apples are good for us, grapes are good for us. There's lots of different vegetables and fruits out there that have a little bit of a sweetness to them. And they are healthy for us because they contain fiber and lots of other nutrients in addition to, sucrose and glucose. And fructose, But, what happens when kids get a little bit older is that we start to see them eating, foods that have more added sugars. And so when parents get into, the point where baby's starting to feed themselves and they're, developing, more of a palate where they're not necessarily eating purees all the time, that's when we start to see the introduction of, more adult foods that tend to be processed foods that tend to have lots of added sugars. And so it can be tough to limit the intake of sweets. And especially, once kids start to vocalize what kinds of foods they eat. I have a toddler myself. And one of the things that's really funny is that they're the most honest things on earth. And so if you say to them, what do you want for breakfast? They'll tell you, I would like a cookie for breakfast. Yep. So they're not going to lie. They're not going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to tell you the truth. And so that's where it becomes an issue because, when kids get to be, in the 1 to 2 year old crowd where they're, vocalizing themselves and they're articulating what they want, they're going to want to have those types of processed foods, those sweets, those things that they, maybe have tasted a couple times and then, the light bulb goes off that this thing is delicious. And so I want it all the time. So it does become, hard for parents, I think, to limit that because you don't want to say no to your child, but we do want to make sure that they're having, a healthy diet that isn't predominantly processed foods or predominantly foods that are, laced with added sugars.
Right.
So I think, one of the things to do is really just, from a very early age, just try to encourage the fact that, you have to eat your meal and then you can have a sweet treat once in a while. It's not the case that we have to have dessert after every single meal, and that's often the case when you go to restaurants, there's always sort of the sweet thing at the end of the meal. And I think that if we can get kids from an early age to become aware of the fact that, it doesn't have to be like that. We don't need to have something sweet at the end of every meal. You could have a piece of fruit after the meal, and that could be your dessert. It doesn't have to be a cookie or a cake. That could really make a difference. And I'm not saying it's easy, especially if, you have a child that's exposed to other adults who maybe, let them, have more variety in the types of snacks that they have, or if, your child's in daycare or preschool where it's people's birthdays and there's lots of treats floating around those places, it can be a challenge. But I think at least at home, it's a good idea to try to limit those types of foods because you're going to find that you really have less control over how much your toddler and your little one are going to eat and the types of foods they're going to eat as they get older. And we want to kind of instill from them from the beginning that, it's okay to have these things, but we just want to make sure that the majority of our calories and the majority of the stuff we eat is coming from, healthy foods like fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, and, the things that we know are good for us.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny you're talking about toddlers being very honest. I went to the grocery store with my niece, and she was showing us all these things that her grandmother gave her that she wasn't supposed to have. It's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. It's extremely funny, actually. But it kind of sort of gets to the point of how impressionable they are, and how much they commit to memory. And just like one exposure to a chocolate chip cookie is enough for them to never forget what a chocolate chip cookie is. It's amazing.
Or even, I know, because I had my niece visit a few months back, and apparently, according to my sister, she'd never had any candies, but I went to go check out at CVS, and she was saying that all these candies were hers, and my sister was saying, like, she notices them like in the ads because, they have the cartoon, and it's just crazy how the marketing is, right?
Yes, I know, that adds to it. Yeah, I mean, even if kids aren't eating it, they're aware that it's there. And
right.
So and that's the other thing, if you say no to it, then they're like, well, what are they saying no to? There must be something that I'm missing about this.
Right?
Like, why would they say no? So they're much smarter than we give them credit for. That's definitely something to keep in mind.
Awesome. Well, I have a bunch of random questions from fans that have written in, but I want to just ask one more general one. So does it really matter what kids eat at a young age, just in general? Like, how concerned do we have to be about this?
Yeah, this is something that people often ask me about because, there's this idea that, it's so early in life, they don't remember, nobody remembers their first meal. Nobody remembers what they ate when they were 2 years old, or what you cooked for dinner for them when they were 3 years old. And so the idea is, like, does it really even matter what they eat at this age? And the truth is, it actually really does. There's been so much research that's gone on over the past couple of years. It's looked at this concept of what's known as the first 1,000 days of life. And so the first 1,000 days of life is from conception through the age of 2. And what we've learned is that nutrition during this window of time, just these first 1,000 days, is so important for later brain development, later cognitive functioning, intellectual abilities, and also immune system development. And so in this very early time in life, we do really need to focus on good nutrition and making sure that baby's getting, everything that they need to, have a proper balance of all the nutrients that they need to stay healthy. And we also know that there's so much learning that occurs early in life. And so, again, having babies be exposed to healthy vegetables and having babies, kind of be limited in terms of the added sugars in this early time of life is a good thing, because the lessons and the behaviors that we try to instill early in life, they really can take with them, for the rest of their life. So I suggest that, people really, take this seriously, because although, we tend to think about those first 2 years going by so quickly, there's so much that's happening in terms of brain development, and so much that's being laid in terms of the groundwork for what's going to happen later on for their health. And it's really important to, try to make sure that the diet that your baby's getting is as healthy as it can be. Especially because, like I said, we have so much research now that's really pointing to the role that nutrition can play in all of this.
Yeah, I know for sure. And I know definitely have the moms to be go check out your earlier book, What to Eat When You're Pregnant. But I guess you want to touch, not to get us too off track, but since we were chatting about it, if you can touch a little bit on the research that's showing us, how food preferences are even shaped from what mom is eating, and what baby would want to eat, I think is interesting.
Yeah. And so there's been lots of research that's looked at this, whole idea of, what mom eats even during, while she's pregnant with baby, and how that can have an impact on baby's nutritional preferences later in life. To me, it's not really all that surprising, because we know that the prenatal environment has an effect on the diet or the baby, right? Because we know, for instance, if a mom is addicted to drugs, let's say, while she's pregnant, the baby's born addicted to drugs. So there's certainly, this crossover between what the mom consumes and what happens to the baby. And so it makes sense to me that, the diet that mom consumes while she's pregnant is going to have an impact on the baby and what types of food preferences they have later on. And there's been studies that have looked at this and looked at the effect of, a diet that's high in junk food and how that can actually have an impact on the development of the offspring, and how it can lead to increased risk for obesity later in life, and how that can lead to an increased preference for junk food and for these, highly palatable, highly processed foods later in life. So it is important, again, as you mentioned, I have another book that came out a few years back called What to Eat When You're Pregnant. And that was essentially a guide of, the science behind, what you should eat during pregnancy, because anyone who's been pregnant knows that it's become something that has become somewhat negative in terms of the nutrition world, because when you talk about foods during pregnancy, a lot of what you hear is about all the food you should avoid. Like, you should don't eat too much fish that has mercury in it, or don't eat, raw hot dogs, or don't eat these like weird things that nobody would eat anyway. But there's not a lot of focus on, what food you should eat. Like, what are key foods to eat at different time points of your pregnancy? They're going to help with, how you're feeling, what's happening to your body, but also help with the baby's development. And so that's the basis of that book, is really to just help people to understand, throughout a pregnancy, what are the foods you can eat that are going to help capitalize on health and nutrition, and, make sure that you have a good, healthy pregnancy, and help to ensure that the baby has the best start in life.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of clients, and my sister has also really enjoyed the book. And yeah, like you said, the main reason why people love it is that, they've been told all these things they can't eat or shouldn't eat, but it's like, what are you left with then?
Right. And that's the thing. It's I feel like we all know what we shouldn't eat. It's,
right.
That's the easy part. But I think for many people, the challenge is, what are the healthy things I should eat? Because, there's not a lot of options when you start to like rack your brain and think, okay, well, what should I eat then? And so that's, the goal of the book is really to kind of give people the ideas on, what are the healthy food options that you should try to have, and give people recipes and just different, avenues to think about healthy food, and not focus so much on the negativity about like what things you have to give up or avoid.
Sure. Hey guys, it's Catherine. I really hope you are enjoying this episode of the show and loving Dr. Nicole Avena and her tips and advice and expertise as much as I do whenever I have the honor of chatting with her. But I'm cutting her off for today. I actually had offered those of you who listened to our previous episode together, episode 40, the What to Eat When You're Pregnant episode, share any of your questions for Dr. Nicole Avena on what to feed your baby and toddler. And so I decided to split this episode up into 2 episodes, where tomorrow you'll get to listen to her answers. She answered every single question, which was super sweet of her. And so we ran way over time for what is technically my 15-minute podcast show, but often is not actually 15 minutes long because I have such amazing guests. So don't miss that episode. Make sure you subscribe if you have not subscribed yet, so you get the reminder. And something else really awesome is that Dr. Nicole Avena has offered to do a giveaway for both copies of her books, What to Eat When You're Pregnant and What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler. So you should still pre-order What to Feed Your Baby and Toddler and purchase What to Eat When You're Pregnant, because even if you win, you're going to be able to give these as a gift to someone, and they're going to really appreciate it. So to enter, you want to head on over to the show notes by going to fitarmadillo.com/podcast, finding today's episode, episode 58 with Dr. Nicole Avena, and then you'll get all the details on the specific show notes page. I wish you luck. And I can't wait to share Dr. Nicole Avena's answers to your questions on what to feed your baby and toddler tomorrow. Chat with you then. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fit 15. For show notes and more, visit fitarmadillo.com/podcast. See you next time.